If you want to watch exclusive Naruto Lemon, then you should go to my boosty, which is in the description under the video. Description: what will happen if the quarrelsome girl, always going ahead, finally breaking free from everyone's hatred and contempt, returns to the very beginning? What will happen if this girl's best friend, sealed within her since birth, also returns with her? Chapters 21 to 25. Enjoy watching. Chapter 21: B-Rank Mission. Let's perform. A loud girlish exclamation rang out right at the gates of Konohagakure, drawing the attention of people passing by to a small group standing at the guard posts, causing quiet whispers and ironic chuckles from passers-by. The reason for this reaction of people was a rather comical picture, the star of which was once again the Hokage's daughter Naruto Namikaze. A young, pretty blonde with a tight big bun on her head, shouting something furiously, but much more quietly, jumped around two adult men and a couple of teenagers just like herself. And if Kakashi and Sasuke, who were simply impossible not to recognize, looked at all this with condescension and hopelessness, then the other two, which the inhabitants of the village of Lista did not know, quite contemptuously. "Are you really that impatient to meet this maniac from Mist Village?" Kurama's voice rang mockingly in the head of the blonde girl, who was merrily jumping like some kind of rabbit. However, despite the mocking tone, a bit of joy was also felt in his voice, because the tailed trickster had long been tired of sitting in Konoha forever. "Just don't need me," the kunoichi snorted vaguely, who really didn't care what was happening. "Well, they will leave the village, well, they will end up in the land of waves. So what?" In her past life, Naruto did not appear in Leaf's native village for several years, having visited the most remote countries. Yes, she was even on a huge turtle, or rather, on its shell, which was an island. And here is some kind of country of waves. "It's just part of my plan, Kurama." With strange, slightly frightening intonations, she added with a grin so that the fox immediately realized that he would find out everything else later. "Why are you so happy?" Sakura huffed in annoyance as Naruto began cutting the 10th circle around them. "Well, this is my first time leaving the village." Finally stopping, the blonde answered enthusiastically, while continuing to mark time. "Hey!" Tazuna Kakashi nervously called out, and pointing his finger at the blonde, asked, "Will this little one really be able to protect me? Can I hurt him?" The Ninetales asked the kunoichi without a hint of a joke in the kunoichi's head, literally radiating an aura of irritation. However, the girl herself was not far from him, mentally turning the bridge builder into a cutlet. "Aha! Well, I'm a jonin," the copy ninja said, glancing sideways at the girl who froze with a dissatisfied face, knowing full well how much this hurt her. "So you don't have to worry." "No, fox face!" Naruto snorted in response, which Kakashi's words angered even more. "I guess I'll do it myself." "Morally," the girl said quietly. "Don't underestimate me, Mr. Tazuna," she said with a sweet and extremely innocent smile, noticing out of the corner of her eye the wary glances of Kakashi and Sasuke, who knew full well that her polite tone would not lead to anything good. "Someday, like my father, I will become Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village." "Hokage, this is the strongest shinobi in the village?" Having measured her with his gaze, the man asked completely calmly, not even imagining that he was now playing with fire. "I highly doubt that a spoiled Heim like you can become one." He snorted meticulously under Sasuke's gnashing of teeth. The guy was already starting to get tired of it. Yes, this person is their customer, yes, they must protect him. Just a few more words and the younger Uchiha will simply beat him up and send him to the land of waves like a bird. That is across the sky. You'll see. Meanwhile, under the approving growl of her friend living inside her, the blonde did not let up, already beginning to lose her composure. "Then you will definitely respect me." "No. I don't respect you," right? The man waved him off. "If you were a real Heim or even Hokage, this would not happen," he finished abruptly, turning away from the seething teenager. "No, I'll still hurt him," the Ninetales roared, slamming his fist hard on the iron bars, causing Naruto to feel a headache for the first time in years. "Shut up, fox face!" The girl snorted quietly, knowing full well that he just wanted to protect her. Very soon he will take back his words, I promise, she added, trying to calm down her inner demon, and walked with long strides towards the exit of the village, completely ignoring Sakura's fierce look and Kakashi's dissatisfied look. Team number 7, together with their customer, with bored faces, silently walked at a slow pace along a wide road, surrounded on both sides by dense forest, for several hours now. However, one restless blonde, contrary to common sense, literally screaming that she should save her strength like the others, always ran forward and looked around with delight. But in fact, the girl didn't care about the surrounding forest, she was tracking those who were watching them, starting from the village itself. The two were hiding in the treetops, wanting to wait for their group to move away from the place, which was teeming with strong shinobi, to attack. And the kunoichi understood this very well, trying to look out ahead for the puddle from which they were supposed to appear, in order to prepare in advance. In general, she and Kurama had several plans that suited different options for what was happening, because everything could very well have gone a little differently than last time. Therefore, the plan she would need to use depended on how soon she would find this damn puddle and whether it would exist at all. Somewhere in the periphery, Sakura and Kakashi could be heard talking about the hidden villages, their kages, and the power of shinobi leading the hidden villages of the 5 great countries of fire, wind, water, lightning, and stone. Naruto knew the Hokage, Kazekage, Mizukage, Reikage, and Tsuchikage, respectively, who ruled thousands of ninja around the world, as well as their closest subordinates. In addition to the 4th ruler of Sand Village, the father of her friend Gaara. Although, most likely, this was for the best, because the kunoichi was not sure that she could contain her anger at the sight of this vile man who killed everything human in his own son. Calm down, it's coming soon! Kurama laughed in her head, just like his Jinchuriki, anticipating an imminent battle, their first serious battle in this time. I know, Foxface, I know. The girl drawled slightly excitedly, literally exhausted from anticipation. Okay, don't worry, Sakura, we won't meet shinobi in this C category mission, Kakashi said as the blonde almost caught up with them. Naru, at the same time as his words, shuddered slightly, her gaze stumbling upon the unfortunate puddle, and masterfully feigning fatigue, she slowed down even more. So the enemy shinobi won't attack us? Sakura sang enthusiastically, walking right behind the blonde. Naru, glancing sideways at Tazuna, noticed his uncertain, bashful look and snorted. Of course not. Kakashi responded with a laugh, patting his student on the head, apparently also noticing the look of their customer. However, like Sasuke, who glanced sideways at the bridge builder who lowered his gaze. Stepping next to the puddle, Naruto literally felt the thirst for murder emanating from her, but with an effort of will, under Kurama's growl, she simply walked past, following her team. Right behind her, whistling some kind of melody, a sharply slowed down Kakashi trudged along, who definitely felt the same thing as she. Then everything happened as if in slow motion. Naruto, as if by chance, turned to her commander and let out a mock cry, because right behind Kakashi stood 2 shinobi of the mist. The copy ninja, reacting to the behavior of his student, turned around in the same way, but did not have time to do anything. The chain connecting the hands of these shinobi was rushing straight towards him. Well, go ahead! The girl shouted to herself, starting to act strictly according to plan. Come on, show them all, Naruto! Kurama growled, echoing her. Naru quickly pulled out from her pouch 2 heavy kunai of a strange shape with a coil on the handle and, taking a couple of quick steps, disappeared from sight. The girl appeared right in front of her commander, literally blowing him away from the attack of the mist shinobi, and in flight managing to throw 2 previously taken kunai towards the enemies. Having landed on the carcass of her future husband, the girl jumped up sharply. Literally for a second she glanced towards Sasuke, who froze with a kunai in front of Tazuna, hoping that he would understand her message. At one time, they spent so many hours together, training, playing, just talking, that the kunoichi sincerely hoped that now he would understand what exactly she wanted from him. And again she disappeared from the enemy's field of vision, only to appear a second later right behind the back of one of them. She touched his back with a light movement and disappeared from view again, as if she had never been there. Her next victim was the second shinobi, with whom, despite his attempt to dodge, she did the same and, jumping a meter, froze, making some kind of seals. But these two didn't want to lose so easily to some petty girl, so, after exchanging glances, they set their sights on a new victim. Finding themselves behind the motionless blonde, who was forming Fuinjutsu activation seals at the speed of light, they were about to attack her with the same technique as the first, when the chain was nailed to a tree by a shuriken, which was immediately nailed tightly with a kunai, depriving the mist shinobi of the opportunity to free the chain. The enemies, jerking their hands with the chain a couple of times, shuddered, but did not have time to do anything. A guy with eyes and hair as black as night landed right on their shoulders. He grabbed them by the edges of the massive gloves to which the chain connecting the shinobi was attached, and kicked them hard in their faces. However, this blow had no effect, because after a moment they freed the chain and, rounding the still motionless Nara on both sides, moved towards Tazuna, who was now protected only by Sakura. Kakashi watched with some strange feeling the actions of the genin, whose strength already reached the level of real chunin, at least one of them for sure. Everything seemed to be going according to a pre-planned plan for Naruto, smoothly and quickly. The only negative was how long it took her to activate those small seals attached to the shinobi's backs. However, Sasuke, who came to help his friend, as if it had been planned this way from the very beginning, gave her a little more time. But this, apparently, was also not enough, and he himself will have to intervene and put these guys down before the frightened Sakura, but still trying to protect the client, and Tazuna himself get hurt. Kakashi abruptly rose to his feet, preparing to rush across the shinobi from the village of Mist, when they simply collapsed to the ground, unable to move. The copy ninja looked at them somehow in disbelief, and then, guessing the reason, he turned his gaze to a smiling Naruto, holding her hands in the Torai seal. "Happened?" Naruto squealed and, not paying attention to the puzzled looks, threw herself on Sasuke's neck. "I knew that you would understand my point of view," the girl squealed, squeezing her slightly blushing childhood friend. "How wrong it is to cheat on your future husband right in front of him," the tailed trickster drawled ironically. "What are you talking about?" the kunoichi asked, completely missing the meaning of his words. "Look at the face of your loved one!" Kurama burst out laughing, causing the girl to stop and turn to look at the commander. Kakashi froze a couple of meters away from them with a stony expression on his face peeking through his thick mask. His dark eye burned through the one whom the blonde was still squeezing in her arms, and his hands clenched into fists until the knuckles turned white. "Looks like he's jealous," the Ninetales said thoughtfully and, unable to bear it, neighed. "Eh?" Naruto said pitifully and looked carefully at her friend, not knowing what exactly she was afraid of. Sasuke looked slightly embarrassed, with a cautious but extremely sweet smile. He didn't even think about breaking away or pulling away, although he didn't like it when someone invaded his personal space, even if it was Itachi or her. "Sorry," immediately raising her hands up, the girl quietly squeaked, taking a few steps back, feeling the jealous gaze of Sakura and the strange Kakashi on her back. "Thank you, Sasuke, for watching my back." "Well done, Naruto," the Uchiha said cheerfully, smiling even wider at the girl, probably for the first time in both her lives, openly praising her. Stay away from him for now," Kurama snorted in a mentoring tone. "Why is this?" the kunoichi asked angrily, but the fox chose to remain silent, showing her that this was not discussed. "Thank you?" Already out loud, she sang affectionately and, turning on her heels, rushed towards Kakashi. "Did you see that?" the girl screamed, still feeling that something was wrong, and expertly jumped on top of her commander. He gently grabbed her, preventing her from slipping, and hugged her back, which once again in these couple of minutes sincerely surprised the blonde. And the lack of comments from the prompter booth was slightly annoying. "Well done, Naru, you made me happy once again," he said cheerfully. "You used one of the maelstrom seals, right?" the man asked more quietly. "Yes, this is their equivalent of a chakra drain seal," she said cheerfully, continuing to hang on the copy ninja. "This seal is several times smaller and acts faster, although only members of the Uzumaki clan can use it." Because of our chakra, the girl said, blinking her eyes innocently, finally getting down from his arms. Fine. Kakashi nodded and, looking up from the blonde's happy face, looked at the Uchiha. And well done, your teamwork is top-notch. Approvingly he chuckled, as if he wanted to say something else. Sakura, it's good that you wanted to protect our client to the last, I'm glad. The copy ninja quickly added and, moving closer, picked up the mist shinobi lying on the ground. Tazuna, I would like to talk to you, looking sternly at the bridge builder, he said and dragged the shinobi carcasses to the nearest tree. About what? The man asked incomprehensibly, still not moving away from what was shown to him by those whom he considered children, and especially that blonde. These are Chunin from the Hidden Mist village. They are distinguished by the fact that they never give up. He spoke quietly, tying the prisoners to the tree with their own chain. Who are these damn kids? Barked one of the Mist shinobi, finally waking up. They're too small to be Chunin, but that little thing used techniques that even we couldn't do the first time. He shouted, piercing his gaze at the blonde, surprised by these words, standing slightly apart from the others. Oh, it looks like someone here is jealous of you. The tailed trickster mockingly drawled to the chuckles of his Jinchuriki. Actually, we are Genins, genius, Sasuke chuckled. And I am the daughter of the Hokage. The blonde waved her hand under the murdered gaze of Kakashi, who didn't want anyone to know about the status of this idiot. Be quiet! Kurama barked, once again becoming convinced of the man's stupidity, because now Naruto has become a possible valuable prisoner who can be exchanged even for the Hokage of the village, let alone some builder. So, Tazuna, why didn't you tell us that experienced shinobi were hunting you? I immediately changed the topic to Kakashi. They didn't know who I was or who these children were, and realizing that they were almost defeated, they immediately aimed at you, he explained his thought. If we had known about this, we would have chosen a different team to accompany you, and the mission itself would have been in a more expensive category. Ian, Hatake added more sternly, looking at the man who had lowered his head. This attitude creates unnecessary problems for us, and now we are no longer obligated to protect you. We are not ready for such a task yet. Sakura assented, realizing the whole situation. Well, in general, you're right, Kakashi said thoughtfully, glancing briefly at Neru, because if her father finds out that they did not return after learning about such a danger, he will get it first, and most likely it will be the last thing he sees in his life. Hey, stop him now! The Nine-Tails growled, seeing that the copy nin was about to agree with this pink-haired liability. I see a fox face! The blonde barked, frantically wondering what to do now. After all, this time there really are much more buts. I won't go back to the village. The kunoichi screamed at these words. I want to prove to my father that I am already strong enough. And if we return, I will remain a helpless child in his eyes. The girl howled, shaking her head so that her hair, gathered in a tight bun, came loose and fell like a waterfall over her shoulders. But Naru! Kakashi protested, walking a little closer to the girl. The fact that we have now met the Chunin and dealt with them does not mean that we will not encounter a truly dangerous opponent next. What do you need it for? Kurama asked ironically, interjecting himself into the conversation. However, only the kunoichi heard him. But we have you. Lowering her head so that her hair hid her face, she said quietly. You are very strong, Kakashi, just like my dad. You were even an ANBU captain. The blonde's cheeks turned bright red, and Kurama's chuckles echoed in her head. But still, Hatake did not agree. Kakashi, please, for me, Naruto said almost in a whisper and threw herself on his neck, burying her nose in his chest. I know that you can protect us, she shouted and, leaning over, added, whispering quietly, right in her ear, protect me, okay. The man reluctantly agreed, simply unable to refuse this girl. Hey! You're already playing with him as skillfully as you did with your father. Kurama laughed in the background, while everyone else looked at this scene with undisguised curiosity, the main characters of which were still standing in an embrace. Yeah! The blonde agreed, pleased with herself. However, she didn't want to twist it, she just said what she thought. Hey sensei, I want to talk to you, Tazuna said unexpectedly to everyone. Talk about the task. The fact is that one very dangerous person is hunting me. A dangerous person? Kakashi said questioningly. In one deft movement he picked the blonde up in his arms like a princess, sat down next to her, and sat her on his lap. Why won't Kakashi-sensei let me go? Somehow strangely, Naru said embarrassedly, sitting down on Kurama's paw already in her inner world. Maybe he's getting used to it? The Ninetales asked sarcastically, watching as his friend, with a ruffled face, slowly blushed. The girl snorted very thoughtfully under the mocking gaze of the tailed one. By the way, why do I need to stay away from Sasuke? Finally finding how to change the topic, the blonde asked. There you go, Naruto. Kurama snorted. If you don't want any unnecessary problems later, just do as you're told. He snapped, realizing that this idiot never got it. And spend more time like this with your commander. The tailed one added mockingly. Go, fox face. In response, the girl snapped at him and turned away. Bye. So these ninjas were hired by Gato? Sasuke asked as soon as Naruto opened her eyes. I just can't understand. Squeezing Naru a little tighter in his arms, Kakashi said slowly. If you knew you had shinobi on your tail, then why did you hide it when you hired us? He asked thoughtfully. Naruto looked at Hatake uncertainly, then looked at his hands, which were quite firmly, but at the same time gently squeezing her shoulders, and exhaled in surprise. The girl had the feeling that her commander would not let her out until the end of this mission. Country of Waves, a poor country. Even our daimyo has no money, Tazuna said, lowering his head. Of course, we don't have them either. We simply didn't have enough for an expensive rank B mission, he said quietly in a sad voice. Well, if you refuse this task, they will definitely kill me. But Kakashi tried to interrupt him, trying to say that through the efforts of a certain blonde, they seemed to have already agreed. Do not you worry. Suddenly the man spoke with a fake smile, completely ignoring the words of the copy ninja. If I die, my little grandson of decades will cry for a long time, he drawled with anguish, and Naruto rolled her eyes, remembering what he would say next. Here's an actress. The fox laughed in the girl's head, voicing her own thoughts. I don't believe it. He immediately laughed, looking at the builder's efforts. Oh yes, and my daughter will live in poverty, forever hating the shinobi of the hidden leaf, he cried, raising his hands to the sky. To which an incredulous, drawn-out chuckle was heard from Sasuke. But it's not your fault, you have nothing to do with it. Almost crying, he finished under the skeptical looks of the entire number 7 team. Well, there's nothing to be done, we will continue to protect you, Kakashi said hesitantly, not knowing whether he would say anything else or not. Yes. Moreover, here is this gifted blonde, the daughter of the Hokage himself, who inherited his power. Having finally finished off both Naru and the Ninetales, and probably all those present, Tazuna exclaimed. Maybe, well, let Zabuza have fun. Look, this old man will drive him into a nervous tic himself. Kurama expressed skepticism. Chapter 22 Zabuza Momochi. Kakashi, with a mournful look, walked behind his subordinates and the customer through the fog-shrouded forest of the Land of Waves. The fact that they had already reached here in just a couple of days and without incident clearly inspired the youth and the builder, but not Hatake himself. He knew this world too well to believe that they were simply released like that, knowing full well that next time they would be attacked not by Chunids, but most likely by Jonids. And this greatly strained the copy ninja. Now he needed to protect not only the customer, but also his charges, and especially Naruto, who was so eager to show everyone what she was capable of. After all, even taking into account all her abilities and skills, this girl was not yet a rival to the Jonin. Only she herself, apparently, did not understand this. The man exhaled tiredly and closed his eyes for a second, returning again to the thoughts that had occupied him all the way here. Naru once again surprised him, if not amazed, with her abilities, literally single-handedly killing 2 Chunin from the village of Mist. At that moment, she was so graceful and precise in her actions and movements. That Kakashi for a moment saw in her place an adult, incredibly experienced kunoichi, who had gone through more than one battle. But even taking into account all her abilities, high-ranking techniques and intelligence, this was her first real battle. The copy ninja did not take into account his task for Team Number 7, because then, as he understood, it was their pre-created, clearly thought-out plan. And despite all this, Nara not only did not get confused, but also managed to work clearly, correctly using all of the above. And this most often, if not always, came to a shinobi only with experience, which a home girl who left the village for the first time simply could not have had. This delighted and at the same time frightened the man, since people like Naruto were extremely rare and most often ended up in ANBU at a young age and either died early or had their lives crippled. Of course, considering that she is the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails and the daughter of the Hokage of the village, such a fate must be avoided by the girl. But all the same, Kakashi was very worried, because, knowing this eccentric woman well enough, in order to prove to everyone, and in particular to her father and future husband, her strength, she could stick herself into the ANBU. And Minato would hardly have been able to stop her, because otherwise she could have ended up in the ANBU route, which was not entirely legal after the fall of the Uchiha clan. And this would have been a real problem both for Minato and for the entire Hidden Leaf village. The next thing Hatake thought about after comprehending this surreal fight, in which the genin, who had received his headband only a few months ago, quickly knocked out two experienced chunin of the Hidden Village fog. These are his own feelings for Naruto. The copy ninja was very worried, and in the end he was even sincerely afraid for her life, breathing out a sigh of relief only when the enemy shinobi fell exhausted. But the very next moment Kakashi was overwhelmed by other, completely inappropriate not just at this moment, but in general feelings. When Naru, laughing happily, threw herself at Sasuke, starting to openly squeeze and press him, and the guy himself smiled shyly and blushed, not even trying to escape. He unexpectedly wanted to reduce the already almost disappeared clan by one more person. And to his horror, this feeling was most definitely a burning jealousy, burning through his heart and making his blood literally boil with indignation. Previously, Naru could only squeeze him and her father so openly. No, she had hugged Sasuke, his brother, Shikamaru, Chuji, and even sometimes Shursui before, but it looked completely different. Not so frivolous, perhaps. Of course, perhaps at that time he perceived them as children, not paying attention to such manifestations of friendship. But now this girl has become a rather beautiful girl, whose hugs were no longer perceived as friendly, but rather as a manifestation of sympathy. And in general, this was exactly what he wanted so much at one time, trying to convince this sunny girl that they were not couple and her love these are children's fantasies. Therefore, realizing that he was jealous was somehow strange and even frightening to some extent. After all, Hatake decided for himself a very long time ago that he had no right in principle to love, and especially not this girl, and she herself simply confuses the feelings of affection and falling in love. But despite his decision, the moment Kakashi saw this picture, he literally went berserk. And somewhere deep inside, an irritated, selfish owner woke up, wanting to tear away from the younger Uchiha what, in principle, makes him a man. Hatake grinned sadly. He, an adult 26-year-old man, a former ANBU captain, who had killed his first friends and was literally covered in blood from head to toe, fell in love with a 13-year-old girl, the daughter of his mentor, the Hokage of the village. Laughter, and that's all. Where is he and where, as Tazuna said, Heim of the Hidden Leaf, Kakashi-sensei, I think someone is watching us. Naru whispered quietly, breaking him out of his thoughts. Hatake immediately perked up and became wary. From Minato's stories, he knew that she was already a good censor, so such a statement was worth listening to. On the right side of the branches, the blonde whispered and immediately added, Look, there's a white hare nearby, and considering that it's spring now, he was kept in a cage and used to replace. The copy ninja finished for his student, catching echoes of someone else's chakra in the same direction. Oh! It looks like a bird is about to fly out. More precisely, that maniac from the village of Fog is about to fly out. Kurama growled in anticipation in the blonde's subconscious. Yeah, fox face. The kunoichi chuckled in tune with him, holding back a smile with all her might. I think this time I'll be able to prove to him the first time that I'm a real shinobi, even without his damn bloody exam. The girl grinned, putting her hand into her pouch and squeezing the handle of the kunai. Get down! Kakashi shouted, throwing the blonde standing next to him to the ground. At the same moment, a huge sword flashed over them, miraculously not leaving Sakura and Tazuna, who were slightly hesitant, without their heads. Naru, having contrived, without looking, threw the kunai in the same direction, hoping to hit the owner of one of the 7 legendary swords of the Village of Mist. The face of the nearby Hatake, who nevertheless saw the attacker, instantly changed, becoming more serious. It seems that your loved one recognized this maniac. The fox chuckled sarcastically in the girl's head. Look how tense you are! Damn it! Snorted in a rude voice from the direction of the tree. Naru, like everyone else, looked up and smiled faintly. On the right cheek of the shinobi, standing on a sword that was halfway into the tree trunk, there was a rather deep cut from a kunai that was also stuck into the tree. Well, Kakashi chuckled deliberately, getting up from the ground. Could it be that the new queen of Hidden Mist Village, the demon Zabuza Momochi, has come to us? Fully confirming Kurama's words, he handed it to Hatake, shaking off the sand. However, after a second he sharply extended his hand, pulling Naruto behind his back, and said seriously, Let's go back, he's no match for you. I'll have to use this against him. Raising his protector from his second eye with his other hand, Hatake said gloomily. And you seem to have Sharingan, Kakashi? The man drawled contentedly. Good reaction, he said, and wiping the blood from his cheek, smiled broadly through his white mask. The blonde felt the tension of her sensei with her skin. Sorry, but this 100, Momochi began to speak, but was interrupted in the most impudent manner. I was the one who threw the kunai. The blonde shouted loudly from behind Hatake. Zabuza stared at her in surprise, clearly discouraged by the impudence of this girl, and heavy sighs were once again heard from all sides. Hello, I'm Naruto. God, Naru, you really are a scary woman and an absolutely unpredictable shinobi. The 9-tailed fox in her skull laughed approvingly, appreciating the awesomeness of everyone present. Are you really not afraid of him? He immediately inquired in a malicious tone. Otherwise, the blonde giggled, counting on just such an effect, and suddenly disappeared. Afraid, the girl honestly admitted, appearing next to her kunai and, having collected all her chakra at the tip of the index finger of her right hand, quickly smeared it right between the man's shoulder blades. But firstly, I need to test this seal on a living person, and secondly, we can always use the cover. A week earlier, a week later. She laughed, disappearing from behind him just as Zabuza's hand closed around the place where her neck was. All this took the kunoichi about 10 seconds, and a fairly large amount of chakra spent. Naruto! Kakashi hissed angrily as she appeared behind him. Are you completely crazy? The man hissed, squinting his black eye at his student, seemingly ready to strangle on the spot the one for whom he had recently confessed his feelings to himself. I've told everyone back. It seems that when it's all over, you'll get screwed, the Ninetails said mockingly under the heavy sigh of his Jinchuriki. Sorry, Kakashi-sensei, the blonde said dejectedly, discreetly winking at her commander, and jumped back towards her team. Am I disturbing you? Zabuza asked mockingly, moving his shoulder. No matter what the little one does, you are still rather weak for me. He laughed and returned his attention to the squad leader. This old man is mine. Gather around Tazuna and protect him. Don't engage in battle, Hatake said gloomily, without turning around. That's an order, the copy ninja ordered with steel in his voice. Zabuza, fight me first. Team 7 flinched and immediately dispersed around the bridge builder with kunai at the ready. Sakura barely restrained the trembling throughout her body, trying to compose herself, while not taking her eyes off the scarlet eye with black splashes, which had previously been hidden by Kakashi's protector. Sasuke noticeably tensed when he saw in the commander's eye what rightfully belonged to his clan, of which only 3 people remained. Naruto, grinning impudently, stood between them, feeling that both of her comrades were quite scared. She didn't blame them. The blonde herself was afraid, hiding behind an impudent mask, no less, because she was well aware of how weak she was now. Ah! I was honored to see the famous Sharingan, Momochi chuckled mockingly. I'm flattered. He smiled ironically, heating up the situation to the limit. What is Sharingan? Sakura squeaked quietly, the only one present who didn't know what it was. What a curious burden! Kurama snorted angrily. Later, Sasuke and I will explain to you what this nonsense is and why Kakashi is considered one of the strongest shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. Now we have more serious problems. Nara shushed her tensely, not wanting to go into details. She generally did not like useless chatter on the battlefield, and her weak seal could fail if it was not activated as soon as possible. That's it! The Nine-Tails snorted approvingly, almost simultaneously with Sasuke's grunt of agreement, causing the fox to growl irritably. Okay. Enough chatter. Zabuza snorted, already tired of waiting for these kids to talk. I have to kill this old man, he said with a slight smile and added judiciously, but apparently I will have to kill you, Kakashi, first. The next moment, Momochi jumped from his sword, pulling it out of the barrel, and smoothly landed on the surface of the water, sending even circles of ripples across it. Kakashi, reacting instantly, moved so that he was standing in front of his charges and the builder. Naruto got ready, sincerely hoping that this time she would succeed. The seal she decided to use only worked correctly a couple of times, but in this situation it was the only one that could help them. Somewhere behind, Sakura's surprised exclamation was heard. He's standing on the water! And meanwhile Zabuza took the Kurigara Jutsu stance. You can't see him! Sakura shouted worriedly, still starting to tremble. Maybe we should knock this pink-haired one on the quiet? Kurama laughed, trying to lighten the situation slightly, but was completely ignored by Naru, who at that moment was carefully scanning the area. The girl simply did not want to miss the right moment once again, and the tailed one, in principle, understood her, but could not remain silent. He'll attack me first, Kakashi said in a mentoring tone. Zabuza Momochi, back in the Mist Village, he was known as a master of silent killing. Hatake continued to say warily, explaining to their students who they had gotten themselves into trouble with. Usually his victims didn't even have time to hear anything before they died, he said completely sadly and added slightly warily. I can't say that I have perfect command of the Sharingan, so be careful. Is he trying to scare you to death in order to get rid of ballast? Kurama snorted irritably, having listened carefully to this lengthy speech. After such words from the commander, the genin noticeably tensed up and began to look around even more intensely, and behind them Tazuna quietly groaned. Meanwhile, the entire space of the small bank on which they found themselves was slowly covered in a thick, damp fog. Gradually, even the figure of Kakashi, who stood just a meter away from them, began to seem rather blurry to the blonde. Cold sweat appeared on her forehead from tension and fear, because now Naru, along with Sasuke and Sakura, could really die 8 places. A quiet, low, kind of animal voice came from the fog. Sakura was the first to break down. She, like a builder, began to quietly whisper some nonsense. However, Nara didn't know whether this was nonsense or not, whether her friend spoke loudly or quietly. The girl turned into one large sensor, focusing on the voice and movements of the enemy's chakra. Liver, lungs, spine, subclavian vein, carotid artery, brain, kidneys and heart, continued the voice that no longer sounded like Momochi's voice, too quiet and dull, as if heard from very far away. But the kunoichi perfectly sensed him very close. He was ready to attack, but not on Kakashi, but on them. Even the tailed trickster in her head shut up, sniffing warily, ready to get out at any moment. This was their backup plan, because when using the cover with all 9 tails, Naruto was practically invulnerable. The only problem was that her body was subjected to too much stress due to Minato's still intact seal and the heat of the scarlet chakra that she had not absorbed. Where should I hit? The voice said curiously, and the fog became so thick that the figures of Sasuke and Sakura were lost in it. Nara swallowed a lump, She didn't even imagine that it would be so difficult. Over time, this fight began to seem rather mediocre to the girl. She forgot these feelings, forgot fear, analyzing only Zabuza's bare techniques and abilities. "Pull yourself together, idiot! Nothing bad happened!" The tailed one barked in her head, sensing that she was slowly losing concentration, succumbing to her panic. "Remember your seal, now you must work quickly and clearly, protect this old man, Kakashi will do the rest." The Nine-Tails growled, bringing his Jinchuriki to his senses. Exactly a second later, Kakashi cleared away the fog around them with a burst of chakra, revealing his back to the genin. "Thank you, Kurama," the blonde said sincerely, again concentrating on Momochi's chakra. "Calm down, Sasuke, don't worry. I can protect you, even if I die myself," the Kakashi clone said cheerfully. Nara knew this. She felt his chakra a little to the side, realizing that he had also made his move. But his words sounded too sincere, making the kunoichi afraid that everything would go differently and her loved one would die right here. "It was scary, making me tremble. I said, get your act together, otherwise I'll take your body and kill everyone in this clearing, okay?" Kurama growled angrily, reminding himself of his past self. But these words helped Nara pull himself together, gave him the strength to breathe and push his fear for Kakashi into the background, because they are shinobi. "I won't let my comrades die." Turning around slightly, the copy ninja said, finally bringing the blonde to her senses. But the very next moment she felt that Zabuza was attacking. With a lightning-quick movement, the girl pulled out 3 more kunai from her pouch and threw them to form a square. Momochi attacked from above, and Hatake rushed across, trying to scatter his students and customer in time and attack the enemy. It was only when Kakashi was near his team that Zabuza's water clone crumbled, colliding with a pale blue box, a fairly powerful Fuinjutsu barrier. "Well done!" Kurama bared his teeth in the skull of the slightly exhausted girl. "What kind of barrier?" Kakashi inquired quietly, standing in front of them at the limit of the cube. "He won't let anyone with a mark on him come to us," the blonde smiled weakly. "But the most interesting thing, he uses the chakra of the one on whom the mark is placed," the girl said proudly, barely audible, proud of her mother's legacy, not noticing the slightly astonished glances of Sasuke, Sakura, and Tazuna directed at her. "Well done," the clone briefly praised, continuing to peer into the fog that surrounded them on all sides. "Southwest 2.5 meters on a tree branch, east 3 meters, the kunoichi said briefly, nodding just as quietly, indicating the place of the second clone and the original. "Northeast exactly 2 meters, noticing the distrust in the commander's gaze, Nara said, indicating the place of his original. "Understood," the man said in agreement, mentally applauding. He also sensed direction and quantity, but due to the fog jutsu, it was all too blurry and vague. "Everyone stand within this barrier," he gave the order and jumped out of it, disappearing into the thick white darkness. Immediately the sounds of battle and echoes of harsh phrases were heard, and the fog began to slowly dissipate, gradually revealing a view of the 2 jounins. "How are you?" Kurama asked as Kakashi's clone was destroyed in too intense and concentrated use of chakra. "Complex seals are too difficult for me due to my problems," the blonde responded, breathing heavily. "Can you already tell me what's wrong with me? I feel my chakra reserve, I can control it. But I can't use it properly." The kunoichi snapped, fed up with these omissions. "Either you understand it yourself, or someone else will explain it to you," the tailed trickster categorically snapped. "Look, now your loved one will be kicked in the ribs." He immediately changed the topic. "Stupid!" Momochi laughed as he watched Kakashi dive into the river, and Nara completely agreed with him, it was very stupid. Glancing briefly at her comrades, the blonde barely noticeably exhaled. Sakura seemed scared, but not so much, and Sasuke was on edge. He also wanted to fight, but he saw the level of this maniac. "Well, shall we use an already proven plan or come up with something new?" The Nine-Tails laughed in her skull, watching through the eyes of his Jinchuriki as Hatake was imprisoned in a water prison. "Don't joke like that. Of course you're old." The girl grinned to herself and glanced briefly at Sasuke. Turning her gaze back, she saw in front of her a water clone of Zabuza, who grinned disgustingly, looking straight at their small squad. We put on forehead protectors, and already consider yourself a shinobi? He grinned contemptuously, looking at the genin one by one. But you know what? A real shinobi is someone who has gone through many battles with death, Momochi said, slowly walking closer to the cube. Neru suppressed her fear with an effort of will and smiled proudly in response, knowing full well that now the barrier would work as long as Zabuza himself had chakra, because during the first collision the seal was activated, starting to work at his expense. In general, when you become strong enough to be included in my journal, then you can call yourself a shinobi, but for now you pathetic nonentities. He swung his huge sword and, amid Sakura's squeal and Tazuna's scream, he slashed it right at the wall of the barrier. Just like last time, the water clone shattered into small splashes as soon as it touched his pale blue wall. Oh, it looks like one of you can be called promising, Momochi grinned, but immediately became more serious. It's a shame he dies here, he said, piercing Sasuke with his gaze. A fan of chatter. Me too, good shinobi! Kurama snorted, once again annoyed by such treatment of his Jinchuriki. We saw it stronger! Nair growled in agreement. Guys, immediately grab Tazuna and run away from here. You can't handle him, Kakashi shouted in a dull voice. As long as he keeps me in a water prison, he will not be able to move, and the clone cannot move a long distance from the original, he said angrily, glaring at Naruto, hoping that at least this time she would listen to him and not drag the others into an obviously lost cause. Run away from here! The man shouted again, watching another clone rise from the lake. Actually, the barrier is mine, smart guy. The blonde snapped, completely ignoring her commander's speech. Write it down in your journal, eyebrowless freak. I, Naruto Namikaze, daughter of the 4th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, will become the 5th Hokage. Coming out from behind the barrier, clearly imitating Kurama, she growled. Kakashi, judging by his look, was ready to bang his head against the wall of this damn water prison, cursing his stupidity and softness, Naruto's bravado, and generally this whole situation. That's right, Naru, you and I bent over the goddess Kaguya herself. This freak is in our teeth. The Ninetales laughed bloodthirstily in her head, inciting the Jinchuriki even more. Sasuke, Sakura, listen here, I have a plan. She grinned, turning to her friends, frozen like idols. Sasuke and I will try to free Kakashi-sensei, and you, Sakura, stay inside the barrier and protect Tazuna. TC, the guy chuckled in a Uchiha-like manner, leaving the barrier after his friend. Well, let's see, maybe something will come of it. He grinned. Don't die, the girl said quietly, mentally cursing herself for her weakness and prejudice towards this strong blonde. Okay, let's start the fun. The girl laughed. You know how to wag your tongue and put up barriers, the real Heim. Zabuza grinned approvingly. How about a fight, Hokage daughter? I told you to run. This fight ended as soon as I fell into the trap. Kakashi literally growled, trying to reason with Naruto and Sasuke. Our debt protect Tazuna, he barked. Have you forgotten? Grandfather, turning to the customer, Naruto said with a plea in her voice. Well, I started this and I can't say that I want to live so much that I would disturb you, said the bridge builder with a brave grin. Sorry guys. Fight as much as you want. And he said that he wouldn't recognize it. The tailed trickster ironically remarked to the kunoichi's chuckle. I heard. Sasuke chuckled. Are you ready? Naruto turned to him. Chapter 23 Imaginary Victory. What kind of children you are? Zabuza's clone said through laughter with irony, looking intently at his opponents. Still playing ninja, right? He chuckled as he took a couple of steps towards Naruto and Sasuke. It's only when I. Raising his hand slightly and looking at her, the former shinobi of the village of Mist said a little more quietly, but after a couple of moments he grinned at something and looked at the genin with a completely crazy look. When I was your age, my hands were already up to my elbows in blood. Naruto Uzumaki, you're weak-minded, get yourself together, there's only one last push left. Kurama growled so that everything in the inner world of his Jinchuriki shuddered, and the water under his feet began to boil from an overabundance of scarlet hot chakra. Moreover, we already know very well about the bloody exam and how Zabuza got his nickname as a demon, which means he won't be able to shock us, he added more quietly, trying to pacify his indignation because of the hurt pride of his vessel, and therefore in himself. Naru exhaled sharply through her teeth, swallowed the lump that had formed in her throat after Momochi's words, and shivered involuntarily. Now, more than ever, she realized that this shinobi was truly one of the most terrible opponents. Even without all these bloody details of his biography, which, by the way, after the last war were not so terrible. And the point was not at all that at the moment they were just a bunch of incompetents, with some joy sent on a mission of rank A. Now, for sure, rank A. For this man was only slightly weaker than Hitaki, who previously held the post of ANBU captain, one of the strongest shinobi of their village. The problem was that now the girl realized too clearly that even being a full-fledged Jinchuriki without a seal that restrains the power of the Bijou, and having as a partner the one with whom they once, in the future, defeated Kagai herself, they would receive from him a worthy rebuff after all. Zabuza Momochi, in fact, had no pity, no fear of death, or even any weaknesses. At least for now, while Haku wasn't next to him, Devil Zabuza. Kakashi said in a defeated voice, so that everyone could hear him, finally tearing Nara out of the stupor that had shackled her body somewhere on an intuitive level. The kunoichi perked up and glanced briefly at the concentrated Sasuke, who, after the fall of the Uchiha clan, just like herself after the war, could not be frightened by terrible fairy tales. She didn't even pay attention to Sakura, knowing that this sissy, still a sissy, trembles like an aspen leaf. And under the approving and anticipatory roar of her inner demon, she again turned her attention to the speakers. Looking sideways at his captive, meanwhile he held out the original shinobi standing in front of the genin. So you've heard something about it, he grinned, as if he remembered something extremely pleasant. Many years ago, looking straight into the blue eyes of his first and favorite student, Kakashi said quietly, hoping to at least bring some sense into her in such a dirty way. In the village of the Hidden Mist, also called the Village of the Bloody Mist, a special exam for the title of ninja was held. Looking down, he said dully, realizing from Naru's sharp, fearless gaze that this little devil knows everything from somewhere. She knows and still gets into trouble where a normal sane shinobi would try to escape. Zabuza said thoughtfully. So you know about that exam too, he said thoughtfully, looking back at the copy ninja. What exam? Sakura squealed behind her. Why is everyone so drawn to rant and strain their nerves to the limit? Kurama ironically asked the void, deciding that no one would answer him now. Well, someone has to. Naru grinned to herself, contrary to the tailed beast's belief. However, she said this only to distract herself, bit by bit gathering her courage to decide on the final step, which simply must change the outcome of the battle. Instead of answering, Zabuza grinned impudently, causing the blonde's comrades to frown deeper. Sasuke was the next to lose his patience. He repeated the pink-haired woman's question in a more demanding tone, not taking his eyes off Momochi, but clearly addressing Kakashi. The former shinobi of the mist grinned again, but this time it was somehow bloodthirsty. Tell them, let them see that this doesn't scare you. The Nine-Tails snorted thoughtfully. It may be a little, but it will encourage that vile Uchiha. He snorted, but the kunoichi blinked thoughtfully and mentally agreed with her friend's words. Okay. She exhaled and, hoping that her voice would not tremble, spoke. The point of this exam is a fight between a pair of graduates until only one of them remains alive. Zabuza's eyes widened slightly, but he remained silent, looking up at the blonde again. Sasuke, standing next to him, cursed, and Sakura barely audibly said, "What horror!" Kakashi lowered his head even lower, but remained silent. 10 years ago this exam had to be cancelled, Hitaki continued instead of his student, without raising his head. Because the devil himself came to this exam in the flesh, he looked at Naru again and said in a strange tone. A little boy, who wasn't even a shinobi yet, calmly, without any regret, slaughtered more than 100 academy students. He wants you to go away and leave him. Kurama's voice quietly rang out in the blonde's head, like an epiphany. But Naruto wasn't going to do that. She simply could not leave the one she loved, could not doom him to death for the sake of her salvation. And for how long? After all, after his death, Momochi will give chase, and then they will definitely die, because Kakashi was the only one of them who could win. Yes, it was fun. Zabuza smiled happily and somehow dreamily. However, it was already too late to scare her. Naruto managed to finally pull herself together and remember who defeated Madara, Kagaya, and generally made friends with the most ferocious-tailed beast. Never, Nara said gloomily, syllable by syllable, in a tone full of cold determination, which was given to her by the thoughts of Hataki's possible death. Then go ahead, Kurama commanded and said ironically, with obvious pleasure. Moreover, your enemy has already begun to act. Nara shuddered. The water clone of Momochi took off with lightning speed and knocked Sasuke down as he went with a shoulder blow to the solar plexus. A clot of blood burst from her friend's mouth, and Zabuza wasted no time in punching him in the stomach with a powerful fist, literally slamming the 13-year-old boy into the ground. The Uchiha coughed up blood again, and Sakura's pitiful sobs and screams and Tazuna's groans were heard behind him. Kakashi cursed quietly, watching in horror as the child he was entrusted with was beaten. Kurama, contrary to his dislike for Sasuke and the understanding that now he is the only partner capable of helping his Jinchuriki, simply remained silent. Phew, the Nukenin exhaled, kicking Sasuke forcefully in the stomach and placing it on him. He calmly said, "Die." Shadow cloning. The blonde hissed no worse than an angry cat, folding her hands into a seal. At that same second, the entire small clearing was filled with clones of the girl with kunai in their hands. Shadow clones, Zabuza said with feeling, looking around, which is why he removed his foot from Sasuke. Yes, so much. He smiled sincerely. I admit, Heim of the Hidden Leaf Village, you surprised me again. If only you were a little older. Although, he grinned lewdly, gazing intently at the original in a tight orange jumpsuit. Yes, I'll tear you apart, you freak. Unexpectedly for the kunoichi herself, the Nine-Tails growled, interrupting her, who was already ready to give a worthy response to her opponent. Naru! A simultaneous cry was heard from Kakashi and Sasuke, while Sakura, standing within the barrier, only screamed in fear and, judging by the sounds, fell to her knees. Forward! The blonde commanded loudly, deciding that her not entirely decent words, taken from Jiraiya's arsenal in her past life, would ruin such a touching moment. All the clones rushed at Zabuza standing in the center, trying to push him away from the guy who had barely risen to his feet. Naruto herself, pretending to attack in the same way, landed nearby, preparing to use the transformation technique at the right moment. Of course, last time she managed to perform this jutsu right during the attack, but now the girl did not want to risk it. Sasuke, having caught his breath slightly, jumped to the side and, taking an attacking stance with a kunai pointed in front of him, concentrated all his attention on the dump of clones of his girlfriend. Sakura, all pale, still tightly gripping the kunai in her hand, sat right on the ground in front of Tazuna and quietly wailed. The bridge builder himself froze, seemingly even stopping breathing, sadly watching how two children desperately struggled with the maniac. Nara didn't see Kakashi, but the choice swear words coming from the direction of the water prison made it clear exactly what he thought about her mental abilities and the situation as a whole. Hatake explained himself so furiously and at the same time alarmedly that it immediately became clear to what extent he is frightened by what is happening. Having listened to another colorful passage from her future husband, Naru almost had no doubt about this. Not after those hugs, the blonde almost missed the moment when Momochi finally got tired of fighting off her shadow clones and took out his sword. One swing of this huge cleaver, absorbing the blood of the people it cut, was enough to scatter everyone. Naruto quickly created another clone and put the necessary seal, trusting her shadow double to continue. Following this, her clone sharply pushed back, as if avoiding the blow, and having flown a couple of meters, threw Fuma's shuriken towards the Uchiha. All these actions took the kunoichi and her shadow double no more than 15 seconds. Sasuke! shouted the blonde's clone as soon as he released his original, which now looked like Fuma's shuriken, from his hands. The guy, despite his injuries, skillfully caught the weapon, at the same time quietly taking out the second one from his traveling bag, and immediately stood up with the mill open, so that the second weapon was invisible. Wind Demon Shuriken! Sasuke shouted menacingly, making Zabuza slightly surprised. Mill of Shadows! Naruto didn't see what her friend looked like when he said these words, but his voice was quite intimidating, which couldn't help but encourage the kunoichi. You can't defeat me with a simple shuriken! Momochi laughed, but at the same time, tension was clearly felt in his tone. This meant that he was undoubtedly surprised by the antics of the kids, playing ninjas. Easily pushing off the ground, the Uchiha soared up and aimed his shuriken Fuma and at the same time his childhood friend. Then Nara felt only flight, closely following the trajectory of her best friend's weapon. She knew that Sasuke would throw it at the real Zabuza, she knew that he would understand her idea. Then, slightly behind the real shuriken, the blonde saw the blue surface of the lake, making sure that she was completely right. I was thinking, we could just move behind Kakashi's back. Kurama laughed sarcastically in her head. Why did you just say that now? The girl snorted angrily, realizing what she really was. After all, she really could have done this, taking Sasuke with her so that he would attack Momochi. Because only Itachi was better than him in throwing weapons, at least in the opinion of the blonde herself, this was so. Well, you said that you want to use an already proven plan, the tailed reptile said in a feigned apologetic tone and immediately laughed offensively. It's clear, Momochi's voice was heard very close to her. So you were aiming at the real me? He drawled contentedly. But that's not enough. He interrupted, catching Sasuke's Fuma shuriken in one sharp movement, giving Naruto a view of her target. A second shuriken hidden in the shadow of the first? Shouted the Nuke-nin of the Village of Mist, seeing a weapon flying straight at him, which there was nothing to catch. The sight of the freaked-out Momochi was simply stunning. Kurama laughed like a sick person in his cage, hitting the water surface with his huge fists. Somewhere in the periphery, Kakashi's clever was heard, causing the blonde to blush slightly from the praise. However, all this lasted only a second, because Zabuza, like last time, deftly jumped over the projectile flying at him. But this is still not enough. Momochi laughed again. It was this moment that Nara chose to take on her true form and throw, this time, 3 kunai at your opponent. Get it! She shouted loudly and, like Zabuza himself, easily landed on the surface of the water, sending light ripples across it. The kunai flew almost exactly in the direction of the subclavian artery, liver and carotid artery. To 3 of the 8 places that the Nuke-nin of the Hidden Mist Village himself had recently spoken about, choosing where to deliver his deadly blow. No, Naruto didn't want to kill or maim him, she wanted to surprise him, make him accept him as a potential equal, show him exactly what she was worth. This was her secret plan, which even the Nine-Tails knew nothing about. After all, it is much easier to come to an agreement with someone who respects you at least a little, rather than knocking on the wall of misunderstanding, while looking like a noisy child. The blonde hoped that after everything that had happened, when she told him about Gato's plans this time, he would listen right away, and not after Haku's death. As for her attack, 3 kunai flying at vital points, unlike the Genin and some Chunin, the Jounin should have dodged quite easily. And the kunoichi understood this perfectly. The only thing Nara hoped for when attacking Zabuza these are a few minor, but rather deep cuts to simplify the task for Kakashi, who has already spent a fair amount of money. After all, in her previous life, the copy ninja held on to sheer persistence in the end, eventually collapsing with exhaustion. She didn't want this now. Even in her last year at the Shinobi Academy, having carefully analyzed this battle, and indeed all her actions in her past life, Naruto realized the importance of strategy and planning. How many victims could have been avoided if she had been a little more collected and calm? All her battles in her past life followed the same scenario anyhow. Naruto acted on bare instincts, trying to do everything possible, forgetting that in most cases she had experienced, strong fighters at her side who simply could not keep up with the flight of the blonde's thoughts. And the result of this was the death of loved ones and countless losses of faceless fighters whom she did not even know. But the girl realized this only in the midst of the war, when, having finally mastered the power of her Biju, she rushed to their aid. Grinning brazenly, Naruto looked pleased at the pair of bleeding cuts on Zabuza's neck and bicep. Momochi bared his teeth brutally, turning to the girl, and twirled the Fuma shuriken Sasuke still held in his hand on his fingers, intending to throw it at the blonde. She shuddered, feeling panic rolling over her. The voices of her friends were mixed and heard as if through thick water. Even Kurama, furiously roaring something inside his skull, sounded too loud, as if he was too far away. Or deep. Before Naruto's eyes there was only Zabuza, and the whistling of the wind from the rotating blades of the mill insistently rang in his ears. But after a couple of seconds, the whistle disappeared. The kunoichi, slightly inhibited, turned her gaze to the right and disappeared. Kakashi caught one of the shuriken blades with a small metal shield on his arm, forcing it to gather into its initial form. Thin streams of crimson scarlet blood quickly flowed down the hand clenched into a fist, falling and dissolving in the cloudy water. But most of all, Naru was fixated on the look, a ferocious one, promising a slow death to those who dared to encroach on his comrades. The first students who passed his test. Completely innocent children who, knowing that they were going to certain death, still did not abandon their commander. It was with this cruel look that Naruto Uzumaki once fell in love, confusing this feeling with admiration and respect. And now Naruto Namikaze also fell in love with him, literally drowning in the feelings that overwhelmed her. "Oh, it looks like he's even angrier than before," the Ninetales said approvingly. "Apparently, the speech of your maniac really hurt him." Kurama laughed, clearly hinting at Hataki's feelings for his Jinchuriki. However, Naru ignored this phrase, as well as the joyful cries of her team, completely absorbed by the surging feelings. Zabuza chuckled. "I seem to have gotten a little distracted and lost control of my jutsu," he drawled, continuing to press the collected shuriken onto the fist of the copy ninja. "No!" Hataki immediately snapped gloomily. "You didn't lose control yourself. You were forced to." Looking encouragingly at the girl frozen nearby, he drawled and, grinning, added, "That's what I'll tell you. I never fall for the same jutsu twice." He chuckled mockingly. "Well, what are you going to do now?" "Pfft!" Zabuza snorted. Kakashi with a sharp movement threw the shuriken blade from his hand and both shinobi jumped several meters away from each other, standing opposite each other. "Get on land to your friend, otherwise you and I will take a swim in the icy water." The fox growled angrily, realizing that his Jinchuriki was still somewhere deep inside his own thoughts. "Eh? Are you afraid of water?" The girl responded sluggishly, slowly coming to her senses, and looked around, not forgetting to be sarcastic in response. "Yes." Realizing that Kakashi and Zabuza had already begun to make seals, she quickly gathered herself and instantly disappeared. Naru landed softly on the tree branch where Zabuza had appeared, with her kunai still stuck out. At the same moment, two water dragons emerged from the transparent surface of the lake, starting to fight each other. The lake raged along with them, throwing huge waves onto the shore. Somewhere behind they could hear the screams of her team and the bridge builder. And Naru looked with delight at the battle of two strong fighters, knowing in advance which of them would be the winner. Demon Zabuza was still weaker than the copy ninja. At least now, when all his attention was focused on the movements of the enemy, a master of water techniques, and they fought using water ninjutsu, standing in the middle of the lake. Kakashi, thanks to the Sharingan, seemed to know Momochi's next move in advance, accurately copying his actions and stances, thereby infuriating his opponent. Zabuza got furious, began to hesitate and make rather stupid mistakes, for which he paid, feeling the power of his own technique. The water explosion swept away Momochi in a huge wave, as well as several large trees and an impressive piece of the clearing on which they had previously stood. "Everything is over," Kakashi said coolly as he landed on the branch next to Naruto. "How?" "That's all the Nukenin of the village of Mist could utter," turning around at Hataki. "It seems, without even noticing the kunai that pierced his body in several places. Can you see the future? Me too, I found a fortune teller. Compared to the same Itachi and Shursui, he is still zero in using the Sharingan. Kurama laughed ironically in the head of the girl watching this picture, for the first time in her memory without calling the brothers vile Uchihas. Yeah! Meanwhile, the copy ninja hissed. And I see that today you will die. He literally spat out, flashing his kunai blade. Hey, is it just me, or is your crush kind of weird? Kurama unexpectedly thoughtfully asked his Jinchuriki. Did you notice too? The kunoichi said tensely, trying to understand what, exactly, was the reason for such changes in the always reserved man. Maybe he's more tired than last time? She immediately suggested. Or maybe he was jealous of one feisty blonde. The tailed trickster sarcastically asked in an unctuous voice, making Naruto blush in embarrassment. However, no one noticed this, because it did not last long at all, because, unexpectedly for everyone, besides Kurama, who sensed someone else's chakra, Zabuza's neck was pierced by a pair of rather impressive needles. Hee hee, laughed an unknown boyish voice. You were right, he died. Haku. Naru whistled enthusiastically, once again admiring his technique, looking at the guy standing on one of the few trees that survived the water explosion. It was the same as she remembered, the standard Kirigakure kimono with pinstripes to the knees, a green haori with white trim over it, and a fringed cloth belt wrapped twice around the waist, and light brown sandals with the same stripes as on kimono. Even his nails, both on his hands and feet, were painted the same color as in her memory. A beautiful blue-green, almost light green color, reminiscent of Nara, sea waves shimmering in the light. Haku's hair was pulled back into a neat tight bun held in place by a white cloth, only 2 of his locks were free and framed his face, tied with small metal cuffs at the ends. The boy's pretty face was hidden by a ceramic mask of a hidden mist village hunterine, painted white with thin slits for the eyes, a red wavy image where the mouth should be, and the symbol of Kirigakure carved at the top. Here is the second one. Kurama grinned in the kunoichi's head. And I've already decided that this maniac has come to an end in the person of your beloved. The tailed trickster laughed unpleasantly. Shut up, fox face! The girl snapped, watching as Hatake slowly jumped from the branch and felt the pulse of his opponent. And judging by the wary look of the copy ninja, the Nukanin's heart had indeed stopped beating. Please accept my gratitude, the young man said, bowing his head slightly, still standing on the tree branch. I've been waiting for a long time for the chance to kill Zabuza, he said measuredly, not paying any attention to the wary glances of the shinobi of a foreign village. Ah, this mask? Kakashi responded thoughtfully, finally getting to his feet. However, at the same time, he remained tense, as if he was preparing to repel the attack. You are a ninja hunter of the hidden mist village, he said, beckoning his charges to him. Naru, trying to look as serious as possible, jumped from the branch and stood behind him, next to Sasuke, Sakura and Tazuna who had approached. Both of her comrades looked, to put it mildly, shabby, and if Haruno was pale and trembling all over, then the Uchiho's condition left much to be desired. All dirty, in torn clothes stained with drops of his own blood, he looked as if someone had used it to dig the beds. The builder, it seemed, was neither alive nor dead, realizing what a disgusting story he had dragged the children into, simply without thinking about consequences of their actions. He could talk to the Hokage, he could somehow save money, he could simply accept his fate. All these thoughts were literally written on his chalk-white face. You are absolutely right. Meanwhile, the young man responded to Kakashi's words, still without raising his head. I am impressed. Ninja hunter? Sakura asked quietly, not really hoping that anyone would answer her. Today, this girl clearly realized that everyone knows much more than she does, but no one really explains anything. Although now she didn't care much about it. Not after this fight. Yes, the young man nodded sedately to her question. My dad hunt down the runaway shinobi of our village, he explained briefly, putting into a couple of phrases what took up hours of narration. Now what? Kurama asked sarcastically. What are you talking about? Not fitting into the flight of thought of her Biju, the girl asked. Well, how about? The Nine-Tails grinned in her head. Are you going to act like a complete idiot again, or will you show miracles of discipline for once? He drawled ironically. What's the point? Nero asked, ignoring his mockery, while Haku and Kakashi played a strange staring contest. Now I'm not so inferior to him in strength. She chuckled and said out loud, so what are we going to do? It's his job, Nero. Putting his hand on her head, Kakashi said quietly in a soft tone. Your fight is over, Haku said calmly and disappeared in a whirlwind of wind, appearing near Zabuza's body. And now I have to get rid of the body, too many secrets are hidden in it, the young man said, picking up Nukanen's body with a force unusual for his slender build. Farewell, he said quietly and, just as before, disappeared into a small whirlwind. Gone, Sasuke stated the fact, gritting his teeth. Okay, Kakashi breathed out heavily. Now we need to take Tazuna home, said their team leader, turning his back to them. Let's go. Thank you guys. Finally, the bridge builder burst out laughing. Come on, you all need a good rest, the man said cheerfully, and it was at that moment that Hatake collapsed to the ground, passing out from overwork. Sleeping Beauty! Kurama chuckled sarcastically. Maybe you can kiss him. Suddenly he'll wake up. The Nine-Tails laughed. Be quiet, fox face! The girl growled, instantly flying up to the lying man. What's wrong with you? Sakura squealed, rushing towards Hatake. Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke was alarmed. Calm down, he was just overtired due to using the Sharingan, Nero interrupted them. He's not an Uchiha, she laughed, looking at her gloomy friend, and immediately put her hand into her hiking backpack. Why does he even have it? Asked the guy. What a persistent Uchiha! Kurama snorted angrily, but was ignored. You better ask him or your brother about this. Itachi was still young, but he must remember that story, the girl said evasively, almost diving headlong into her bag. It's not my secret, the blonde said more quietly, looking at her friend, and receiving a short nod, disappeared again into the depths of her bag. What's happening? Sakura whispered, not understanding anything from the dialogue between Sasuke and Naruto. Oh my god, another one! The tailed creature snapped tiredly in the girl's head. It's a shame we didn't slam her down on the sly. He laughed. Not now, Haruno, we need to make a stretcher, categorically the Uchiha snapped, starting to look around in search of suitable branches. No need. Finally emerging from the depths of her backpack, the blonde shouted. I have something better. Waving a rather impressive scroll in front of everyone, she said. Sasuke raised an eyebrow questioningly, examining the animated blonde. What is this? Sakura asked sternly, frowning, seeming to have already forgotten that Nero had recently saved them from certain death. Really, why didn't we knock her out during the battle? The kunoichi hissed in annoyance to the mocking laugh of the tailed reptile in her head. But still, squeezing out a rather friendly wide smile, the girl already explained out loud, this is a scroll of Funyo no Jutsu. In other words, sealing technology, she said softly. Do you remember how I brought you and Sasuke a hot breakfast and scrolls for our first training session? And waiting for an uncertain nod, continued. This one operates on the same principle as the scrolls in which experienced shinobi enclose large weapons. Do you even think with your head sometimes? Kakashi-sensei, don't kunai and especially, don't scrambled eggs. The pink-haired girl hissed, stamping her foot, piercing the kunoichi with her gaze. Although who am I telling this to, Sakura, listen, this is... Naruto spoke again, barely holding back the rising anger, having already forgotten that her best friend could be so unbearable. For the first half of their acquaintance, this damn idiot was always clinging, sarcastic, finding fault, bringing the already harassed girl to a state of uncontrollable rage. However, after the Chunin exam, she reconsidered her views, becoming more tolerant, slowly becoming a real friend for Nero. Naruto Namikaze, get serious already! The girl said in a mentoring tone, looking down at the blonde. More serious? The kunoichi asked, blinking her eyes stupidly. And yes. This girl's logic is simply amazing, Kurama said ironically. Haruno, calm down already, Sasuke said harshly, standing next to the blonde. Nara loves Kakashi-sensei, so what she offers cannot harm him, he explained, showing simply miracles of eloquence for the Uchiha. Let her at least finish talking, then accuse her of being careless. The nine-tailed kunoichi in the skull whistled at this speech. However, the girl herself was ready to applaud him right now. So, Naru, explain to us what this technique is? This scroll is a prototype of the one used in our village. Following her friend's words, she spoke, unfolding a parchment with a drawn circle with 4 rays, inscribed with some strange writing, next to Hataki's body. This is just the one they use in the Hidden Leaf Village, his pathetic copy, created by the wife of the first Hokage based on the Fuinjutsu of the Whirlpool Village, she said thoughtfully, remembering her father's explanations and her mother's notes. You really can't seal a living person in it. Only a corpse, the girl snapped, noticing Sakura's questioning look. My scrolls, this is, so to speak, the original. The only problem is that only a member of the Whirlpool clan, like my mother and accordingly myself, can create such seals, she said quietly. Therefore, there is no danger to Kakashi's life. I will say more, he will be much more comfortable this way than on a stretcher. Not to mention yourself. The tailed beast pragmatically added in her head what the kunoichi herself had kept silent about. Sakura, are you satisfied with the explanations? Sasuke asked the pink-haired girl and, receiving an embarrassed, hesitant nod in response, said, Take action, Naru. Yeah, the blonde said in agreement and, smoothing out the scroll, folded 5 seals, quietly whispering something. Kakashi evaporated with a loud bang, leaving behind only puffs of white smoke, and on the parchment, in a circle with rays, a large intricate design appeared, vaguely reminiscent of a whirlpool symbol. Ready. Well, are you all ready now? Tazuna, about whom everyone had already forgotten, clarified happily. Went, Chapter 24, Heroes. As soon as Team Number 7 found themselves in a rather modest house for Tazuna's profession, the blonde immediately demanded a separate room. Tsunami, the daughter of a bridge builder, was naturally outraged by such impudence from some petty girl. But to the woman's surprise, the builder himself pointed at her, telling her not to contradict and to provide everything that this girl asks, calling Nara Haim of the Hidden Village list. He did this so as not to waste time on explanations or because of something else, but, realizing that this girl was not so simple, Tsunami, gritting her teeth, agreed. Once inside the room provided to them, the girl, not at all embarrassed by prying eyes, spread out a large scroll with a round design and, under the stunned gaze of the daughter of the owner of the house, without wasting time, opened it. However, if Tazuna had not seen how the blonde sealed her mentoring to him, he himself would have been pretty scared by the sight of the lifeless, at first glance, pale body of a man appearing in puffs of white smoke. Kakashi was still unconscious, which, in principle, was not surprising, because when using this technique, time freezes for those who are exposed to it. That is why earlier, during the Shinobi World Wars and difficult missions, this technique, as well as those who could use it, were worth their weight in gold. After all, thanks to her, even a mortally wounded person could wait until he was taken to the hospital. But at the same time, it was this technique, along with several other high-ranking seals that could only be used by members of the Whirlpool clan, that led the once large and powerful clan to its decline. The reason for this was the neutrality of the red-haired people. They refused to train outsiders, refused to take sides, agreeing only in rare cases when it directly concerned the clan members and the nine-tailed fox. This tradition dates back to the time of Hashirama, or rather his wife, born Uzumaki. Although it should rather be called a contract between the Leaf Village and the Whirlpool clan. In general, Naruto calmed down only when Kakashi was laid on the futon, and she carefully treated his wounds and the wounds of her best friend, who had suffered more from Zabuza than anyone else. After which the blonde finally returned to her usual state of eternal sun, slumped down next to her mentor's futon. Sasuke and Sakura sat a little to the side, completely defeated by the sudden onset of fatigue. It turned out to be, to put it mildly, not the most successful day for the teenagers, a long journey, stress, fear, and exhaustion due to the battle with Zabuza, and, like the icing on the cake, not the best close road to Tazuna's house. Naruto, with her eyes closed, sat next to the fainting Kakashi, barely perceptibly squeezing his warm hand. From the outside, it might seem that this noisy, incredibly lively and positive girl, having sat relentlessly next to her beloved for some time, finally gave up, like her comrades, and fell asleep. But in fact, she had been nervously arguing for an hour in her inner world with the one with whom she had shared her body and strength not for the first time in her life. No, no, and one more time, no! Fox face. The blonde hissed menacingly, proudly sitting on the huge soft paw of her inner demon. I won't take off Kakashi-sensei's mask, much less kiss him while he's passed out, she said, and turned away from the impudently grinning fox, who knew full well that she was already one step away from throwing all her principles to hell and finally looking at the face of her chosen one. Oh, come on, Naru, the Nine-Tails smiled mockingly, moving its massive head closer to the Jinchuriki. Maybe I went a little overboard with the kiss, but admit it, you yourself are interested in what the person to whom you gave your heart looks like. He laughed ingratiatingly, understanding perfectly well. A few more minutes of persuasion, and she would finally give in and look under her sensei's mask. It's no joke, but the tailed one himself, like some girl, was literally languishing with curiosity, because even in their past life this man managed to hide his face from his restless students. Hatake, in some unknown way, managed not only to avoid all the tricks invented by his charges, but even in a fight, where only pitiful scraps remained of his mask, to hide his face. No one, including your loved one, will know about this, he whispered quietly, continuing to put pressure on the blonde, who was still sitting with her back to him, and realizing that she had almost surrendered under his pressure, he issued his last argument. Naru, think for yourself, what if he's hiding some terrible injury or scar under his mask? But noticing Naruto's disapproving glance over his shoulder, promising him a long and painful death, he immediately hastened to explain his thought. No, I have no doubt that appearance is for you the 10th thing. It's just that in this case, if you see this in advance, then in the future you will be able to react appropriately, without offending your loved one with your behavior. He said in such a voice that one could really suspect participation in him. However, with his caring tone and kind words, he did not fool the kunoichi. The Nine-Tails was well aware of this, because they had been together for more than 30 years in total. But to create doubt in her bright head, oh, Kurama, admit it already, you're just curious. Kindly abandoned the kunoichi, fighting the urge to immediately agree with him and look under Kakashi's mask. However, I myself am incredibly interested in what he is like without his damn mask. But this is how to take advantage of his helplessness, she drawled conscientiously, finally turning normally to her old friend and partner in countless battles. You, damn you, are right for once. He chuckled, knowing in advance that this would happen. But this does not change the fact that I am right in some ways. TC, she snorted, recognizing the truthfulness of the words of this impudent fox face. Okay, but know that I don't like it. Finally deciding, she cut off Naru, rising to her feet with the goal of finally achieving what she, in the depths of her heart, was waiting for even more than receiving the post of Hokage. That's good, friend, declared the tailed reptile. By the way, you still haven't told me about what you are going to do with these maniacs from the village of Fog, he said thoughtfully, looking at the back of the slowly retreating blonde. I don't know myself yet, Kurama, she said honestly, looking at the Nine-Tails for the last time through the bars of his huge cage. I guess I'll just go with the flow for now. Naruto opened her eyes in the room of Tazuna's house, immediately resting her gaze on Kakashi's still pale, but, unlike his usual expression, serene face. After timidly looking around to reassure herself that her teammates were still fast asleep, the girl rose to her knees and bent over the man. With a slight movement of her wrist, the kunoichi released Hataki's warm hand from hers and carefully reached for the black piece of fabric hiding the man's face. Somewhere in the depths of her consciousness, the Nine-Tails giggled disgustingly, anticipating the imminent revelation of one of the most discussed secrets of the Hidden Leaf Village, both in the past and in the future. The blonde slightly wrinkled her forehead, damp from the sudden appearance of sweat, and mentally sent her tenant to hell. A light touch of the dense, rather rough fabric of Naruto's delicate fingertips, despite training with kunai and shuriken, literally sent a shock through her entire body. By force of will, keeping her hand in its original place, the blonde carefully exhaled and running her fingertips along the rough surface of the mask from her chin to her cheekbone, reached its edge. Kurama was already openly raging in her head, almost urging his Jinchuriki with obscenities. It seemed that the Ninetales could not stand it now, and would break its seal solely in order to quickly pull off Hataki's damn mask. "Calm down, you crazy-tailed one!" Holding her fingers at the very edge of the mask, the kunoichi growled, feeling a slight trembling in her body because of his behavior. "Be quiet and work with your hands!" Without hiding his impatience, the demon fox barked, but still, after the girl's words, he calmed down a little, fearing to scare away either Naru or Kakashi. The blonde only chuckled at his words and smiled with satisfaction, because no matter what this trickster said, he listened to her. "Well, let's get started," the kunoichi said in a whisper to herself, as if someone besides Kurama could overhear her, and carefully picked up the edge of the ill-fated mask. At the same moment, three completely unrelated things happened. Sasuke, dozing near the wall, slipped along it and fell right on the feet of Sakura, who was sitting nearby. The door to the room quietly opened and Tazuna and Tsunami appeared on the threshold with wooden trays in their hands. Hataki, as if due to a nightmare, suddenly opened his eyes not hidden by the blindfold and jumped up on the futon. Naruto blinked stupidly, meeting her sensei's dark eye point blank, and with her lips she felt the light touch of something rough, but warm and soft. Somewhere behind, the rumble of something hitting the floor was heard, mixed with exclamations, and in my head Kurama literally exploded with cries of abuse and approval. The kunoichi fell into a stupor, slowly realizing what exactly had happened and why her stomach suddenly twisted and her legs trembled. Her hand was still touching Kakashi's face, only due to the sudden change in the copy ninja's position. She was now lying on his cheek, feeling the heat of his skin. "Naruto?" Hataki said quietly, blowing his hot breath over the girl's sharply dry lips. "What's here?" He spoke slowly, but immediately broke off and glanced down, to where he was almost weightlessly touching his student's lips with his own. "Grab him and kiss him for real!" Kurama ordered, who was clearly not too disappointed by the failure of his Jinchuriki. But the copy ninja, who had already realized what had happened, abruptly pulled away from his student and fell onto the futon again, uttering something that resembled pain and horror at the same time. "Kakashi-sensei, how are you feeling?" Hearing him, Sasuke asked cautiously, the only one present who remained calm. "Well, or his likeness," because the cheeks of the younger Uchiha noticeably turned pink. "Guys, I really ask you to keep all this between us," frankly Hataki blurted out, ignoring his student's words. "Otherwise, after we return, Minato will simply kill me." "Where is the justice, you ask?" Kurama asked ironically, while the others digested the picture they saw and the words spoken by the sensei after that. "He stole a girl's first kiss, but he doesn't want to take responsibility," he muttered, like a grumpy grandmother, but Naruto, who had almost recovered from shock and embarrassment, felt the catch that immediately followed. "Although, admit it, it's better than your last time." He laughed sarcastically, hinting at an incident with Sasuke that happened in their previous life. "Shut up!" The girl literally growled, instantly flushing with embarrassment to the tips of her ears. "Forgive me, Kakashi-sensei," she said more quietly, trying to hide her burning cheeks behind her long hair as quickly as possible, and then crawled away from her lover, sitting down next to Sasuke and Sakura. Are you okay, sensei?" Tsunami asked slightly hesitantly, trying to change the topic of conversation and draw attention to herself and her father. As a girl, she understood from Naruto's reaction that not everything was so simple and this eccentric blonde was breathing unevenly towards her teacher. Therefore, I tried to help her a little, like a woman to a woman. Team number 7, frozen like idols, led by their mentor, slowly turned their gaze to the woman standing in the doorway. The blonde shrank even more, dreaming of now falling through the ground, because if she disgraced herself in front of her comrades, her little secret was still tolerable than in front of strangers. Finally overcoming herself, Naruto looked out from under her bangs and shuddered. Tsunami's black eyes looked at her with some understanding. The woman smiled broadly at her and, throwing away her long blue hair, with a slight movement of her hand, shook off the crumbs from what was on the tray from her pink shirt with short sleeves and a red collar, and from her long blue skirt, imperceptibly winking at the surprised Kunoichi. Yes, but I won't be able to move in the next week, Kakashi responded quickly. Sharingan this is, of course, cool, Sakura said hesitantly, finally switching. But if you use it often, you won't last long. Well, this time we defeated a very strong ninja. Tazuna smiled, believing that now they had some time to rest, and stepped over the remains of the snack that he and his daughter had prepared for his saviors. I think we're safe for a while. He chuckled, landing on the other side of the futon the copy Nin was lying on. By the way, what kind of shinobi was in the mask? Sakura asked thoughtfully, mindlessly watching Tsunami collect the remains of food from the floor. God, how embarrassing! The blonde howled, not listening to their conversation. By and large, she already knew who the Hunter Nin were from her past life and even encountered them several times during the Fourth Shinobi World War. Now she was more worried about her own shame. Don't drift! The tailed trickster, who had previously been sitting quietly and peacefully in his cage, laughed at these words, because the Kunoichi still, slightly, scared him with her roar. Sooner or later this was going to happen, so why not now? You do not understand, she snapped. Why, even in this life I have everything in one place. The blonde, mentally clutching her hair. It's simple, Naruto, the tailed one said thoughtfully. It's because you. He drawled ironically and burst out laughing. But now you should still get together and take part in the conversation, dear. And you can do self-flagellation at night, he added mockingly, hinting that later she simply wouldn't have time for this. Fuck you, the blonde muttered, although she still followed his advice and tried to understand Kakashi's words about hunters. They are specialists in protecting their village. Meanwhile, Hatake spoke, judging by the thoughtful faces of those present, already approaching the end of his mini-lecture. Not a trace, not a smell, not a drop of blood remains, he said gloomily. This is the end of all shinobi. So Zabuza will be cut into pieces and destroyed? Sakura pitifully squeezed out, apparently imagining this in her head. Horrible! Kakashi-sensei, don't you think it's strange that he took it with him? Pushing the man to the essence of the conversation, coping with embarrassment, the girl said. Isn't a head or, for example, a hand enough to prove his death, and also these needles? Of course, you can kill with them, but more often masters use them to paralyze the enemy, Sasuke said in agreement, also suspecting something was wrong in all this, unknowingly helping Nara lead Kakashi to the fact that Momochi was still alive. Well done, you caught the essence of my story about ninja hunters, the copy ninja said sparingly, looking at his students one by one. This is why I believe that Zabuza is most likely still alive. And this Uchiha is attentive. The Nine-Tails laughed, again showing favor to the one he hated. I wonder if last time he also thought about these needles. Kakashi-sensei, you yourself checked his pulse and said that he was dead. Sakura screamed while everyone acted in genuine surprise. Even Naruto was quite naturally surprised, though for a slightly different reason than the others. Still, this burden is boiling the pot. Kurama snorted. You're right, Sakura, I said it, but most likely it was only a temporary death, Hatake answered calmly, looking at the frightened pink-haired girl. As Sasuke already noted, the needles that the hunter used can only kill if they hit a vital organ, he explained his thought. Such needles are used by doctors for acupuncture, and since the ninja hunter knows everything about the human body, it is quite easy for him to fake death. That is, considering that he took away a body that was much heavier than him, used a weapon that is difficult to kill with. Sasuke continued to speak doubtfully for his mentor, but faltered at the most obvious conclusion, which frightened him too much. His intention was not to kill, but to save Zabuza. Naru revealed what was on the tip of most people's tongues. We cannot ignore this possibility. Kakashi nodded barely noticeably from a lying position. Or maybe everything is much simpler, Tazuna said incredulously, sincerely not understanding why these shinobi were so alarmed. The hunter must kill runaway ninjas. No, Hataki snapped sternly, glancing sideways at their client. Consider all possible options and prepare for them before it's too late. This is the law of shinobi, he explained to the man and turned his gaze to his students sitting in a row against the opposite wall. Plus, whether Zabuza is alive or not, Gato can always hire an even stronger ninja, he said, noticing how Naruto and Sasuke's eyes lit up in anticipation of a new battle. Sensei, how are we going to prepare? Sakura asked quietly, immediately interested in the practical part of the copy ninja's words. You can't even walk, she said louder, trying to understand what they should all do now. Is it just me, or was this pink-haired one smarter before? Kurama asked, giggling with a bit of irony in his voice. But I can train you, Kakashi responded good-naturedly. It's just that you and I have become smarter here, because we went for a second pass. The blonde responded, barely holding back her laughter, unexpectedly finding this whole situation quite comical. Train? Haruno asked, looking at her sensei like a ram at a new gate. But how can regular training help us? The girl hissed in such a way that it became clear to everyone in this room that she was the one who thought of this idea. After all, even you with the Sharingan had difficulty coping with Zabuza, she shouted, clenching her hands into fists until her knuckles turned white. Speak for yourself. The tailed trickster snapped mercilessly, after which he disappeared into the depths of the kunoichi's subconscious, deciding that sleep would be much more interesting. Sakura, the copy ninja, said tiredly in a tone more suitable for a father explaining common truths to his child. And who saved me and helped me win? He asked a rhetorical question and, gathering his strength, sat down on the bed. You guys are growing up very quickly. He smiled at his charges, looking at each one in turn, while feeling some pride in them. Of course, this will be a simple training until I finally recover. And without me you won't be able to cope with him, he said morally, raising his index finger up to cool their ardor a little. But sensei, if Zabuza is alive and can attack at any moment, can we be distracted by training? The pink-haired girl blurted out worriedly, looking at the man in fear. Sasuke silently nodded, confirming that he was also interested in this question. Oh, this, the copy ninja said intelligently, having forgotten that his charges, no matter how adults they may seem, still remain children and many things need to be explained to them. A man immersed in. Oops, someone wasn't singled out from the general gray mass like last time? A mocking voice rang out in Naruto's head, who forgot to think about him, completely immersed in the conversation. But he answers the questions of this pink-haired burden so thoroughly and affectionately. He drawled mockingly, continuing to chuckle mockingly while Kakashi explained to the others why Zabuza would need time to recover. What are you hinting at, Kurama? The blonde hissed indignantly. Oh, aren't you the least bit jealous of him? The tailed reptile feigned amazement. Then we will train until then. Sasuke chuckled in a purely Uchiha manner after listening to the commander's speech. No, not to Sakura! The girl snapped more calmly and, stretching her lips in a wide smile, said out loud, It will be fun. Nothing's fun. A child's exclamation rang out throughout the room, drawing everyone's attention to its little owner. The child appeared to be about 8 years old, wearing a green jumpsuit with a yellow t-shirt and simple sandals. The boy's dark hair was hidden by a white hat with blue stripes, from under which only large black eyes were visible. Even Kurama, who had prepared a fiery speech about the fact that her friend was also a girl, and likes sometimes change, faltered, noticing his disapproving glance directed at Naruto. Inari. Tazuna responded joyfully, all this time silently watching the conversation of the Leaf Village shinobi. Where have you been? Welcome back, grandfather. Completely ignoring the question, the boy answered without much emotion, but still ran up and hugged the man tightly. Inari, say hello? The woman said calmly when Tazuna finally released his grandson. These shinobi will protect Grandpa, she said, pointing her hand at Team 7, who surrounded their commander as he lay on the futon. But instead of greeting, the child looked at them from under the brim of his hat and snorted. "Mom, they will all die soon," the boy said, pointing at the shinobi, completely calmly. "And I like this kid." Kurama chuckled. Naruto was in some kind of prostration. She remembered a completely different Inari, cheerful, kind, and ready to help in any, even the most stalemate, situation. "I had already forgotten how much he has changed since our first meeting," the blonde said gloomily, unlike last time, deciding to remain silent. "Don't you dare say such things, little one." Sasuke chuckled, throwing the blonde into deep shock. Always calm and reserved, now he was clearly angry. "Sasuke, don't, he's just a child," Sakura said barely audibly. "Here is the true Uchiha." The fox immediately bristled. "There's no way you can handle Gato." The boy continued to speak confidently, not paying attention to anything. "Hey Inari!" Naruto called out to him, deciding that her psyche would definitely not be able to withstand Sasuke's altercation with the child, and judging by the Uchiha's look, it was already just around the corner. "I am a superheroine, and someday I will become Hokage, the most powerful ninja." Stretching forward her clenched fist, the kunoichi shouted. "I don't know this Gato of yours, but he's nothing in front of me," the girl said confidently, noticing out of the corner of her eyes that her friend had relaxed slightly. "Pfft," the boy grinned. "What are you, really?" the child spat out, glaring at the blonde. "There are no heroes." "Calm down, he will soon change his mind," the Ninetales drawled peacefully, which was not at all characteristic of him, feeling the anger and terrible pain of his Jinchuriki caused by these words of the boy. They were too reminiscent of what she herself had felt deep inside her heart in the past. "I don't know what happened to you, Inari, but you're wrong." Lowering her head, Neru spoke, feeling how the words of this child hurt her heart, causing it to bleed again, as if the door separating her from the world had slammed shut again, leaving the blonde alone with her loneliness and pain. This feeling was superimposed on the sharp contrast between the Inari she knew well and this downtrodden boy. The difference was not just big, there was a whole abyss between his future and past. And Naruto not only didn't want to see this child like that, but couldn't. "But for me, my mother, who died protecting me, was a heroine. My father, who raised me alone, while simultaneously managing a shinobi village, a hero. Kakashi-sensei, protecting us at the cost of his life, hero. Itachi, who lost his parents, but managed to raise his younger brother as a worthy man, a hero. Even your mother and grandfather, who are not afraid of Gato and his thugs, heroes," the kunoichi said dryly to her inner demon, and without raising her head, ran out of the room in complete silence. Chapter 25, Sensei. Naruto stood on the veranda of Tazuna's house and thoughtlessly looked into the distance with sad eyes. A light breeze coming from the direction of the endless sea pleasantly blew across the face, gently playing with hair as golden as the sun itself. The rhythmically swaying blue waves, the same as her bottomless eyes, calmed the indignation and contempt for her own weakness boiling inside the girl. And the sky-high horizon, stretching into the distance with a thin, barely noticeable line between the sky and the sea, pacified, putting in order the already pretty frayed nerves of the blonde. Still, in some way, she was already over 30, she went through general persecution, the betrayal of her first love, a cruel war with a real goddess, and finally, became everyone's favorite heroine. So that one day, stupidly having reset all this, start life from scratch, leaving behind only a huge burden of emotions, memories and fear, locked deep inside her heart. It hurt Naruto to know about the deaths of people close to her, but to remain silent. It's hard to lie to all your family and loved ones. It's simply unbearable to hear insults from those who in the past and future were her true friends, and to tolerate being ignored. But the girl held on stoically, realizing, over time, everything will change. Everything will return to normal, and she will receive as a reward for her labors many saved lives, not only of those who were close to her heart, but also of other people. But what just happened to Inari, unexpectedly for her, literally demolished all the barriers that the blonde had built with such difficulty in order to somehow isolate herself from the past. It seemed that this was just another meeting with her former friend. The most ordinary conversation with someone who, with time and her feasible help, would radically change, believing that goodness and heroes exist. But his words, or rather, the emotions invested in them, outweighed her patience. The blonde literally physically felt how all the dirt and cold that she had so stubbornly hidden in her heart overflowed, finally breaking out. Loneliness, pain, disappointment filled her to capacity, turning her into a reflection of herself. Previously, in her past life, she thought absolutely the same way as Inari, in the depths of her heart hating the village, the Hokage, and in general this whole rotten world. And even herself. The only difference was that the girl hid these feelings, trying her best to love every day and all the people around her. And this boy himself hid behind contempt and resignation with such a life, believing that it was simply useless to fight. However, Naru understood his feelings, because if she had remembered from childhood how, before her eyes, her parents were killed by the tailed creature sitting inside her body, then all this would have ended in something similar. Although, considering who she was, everything would have ended a bloodbath, and it is not a fact that only the Hidden Leaf Village and its inhabitants, who so neglect the sacrifice of her parents and the role of the girl herself, would have suffered. The only thing that saved the blonde from this was that the baby was kept in the dark until a certain age. Yes, this caused even more pain, making Naruto feel like a black sheep, an outcast of this world, but still. Later, after talking with her parents, or rather with the imprints of their chakra, Nara finally resigned herself to her fate, realizing that it was better this way than sit on a leash all your life or become someone like Nagato. It was then that the kunoichi decided for herself that she would become the one who would save everyone, even if everyone was against it. Never mind, we will show them all who Naruto Namikaze is. Warmly, which was absolutely not characteristic of him, the Nine-Tails laughed in her head. He didn't know exactly why his Jinchuriki slipped into melancholy again, but this idiot, after all, was his only friend in this whole damn world. As they once showed everyone who Naruto Uzumaki is. He laughed heartily, realizing that he was talking some kind of nonsense. Kurama, I'm so tired of all this, the girl answered sadly, ignoring what could have been a good hairpin for the fox. I don't want to lie and dodge anymore. I don't want to feel all that hatred from the village. I don't want this war and bloodshed, the blonde said angrily, outwardly remaining just as sad and distant. The Nine-Tails silently lowered his head, realizing why she suddenly became so. I just want to live and love like an ordinary person, she cried out, swallowing the tears that had come, and felt wet, salty trails running down her cheeks. Sorry, probably for the first time in his life, the tailed man sincerely apologized, realizing that when he returned, he had to choose Minato or someone else as his vessel, so that this sunny girl could for once live like an ordinary person, and not a Jinchuriki. She had already gone through a lot and helped him believe in a person, and it didn't matter if it was only one, because this was the beginning, because Naruto, unlike him, was not eternal. Therefore, in this life, his girlfriend, who replaced the tailed Hagoromo, deserved at least a little calm and peace. However, Kurama was a possessive, selfish bastard, so even now his conscience did not particularly torment him, since Naru, as long as she exists, must be his vessel and friend. Just seeing how Naruto sobbed, he could not help but apologize, realizing that by his reluctance to see someone else as his Jinchuriki, he simply ruined her life again. You don't have to apologize, Kurama. After all, you are the only one who supported me all this time. She smiled through tears, trying to defuse this strange atmosphere. You are my most precious friend, the kunoichi blurted out, trying to express how much she appreciated his support, advice, and even his jokes. No, I must. The Nine-Tails laughed nervously, gradually returning to its usual state, and listening to something, sarcastically stretched its lips into a wide grin. You, my dear, should be at least a little more impudent, and you will have everything, he said with undisguised sarcasm and disappeared somewhere in her subconscious, while the blonde, blinking her eyes stupidly, tried to understand what it was. Naru, they quietly called the thoughtful girl from behind, causing her to flinch imperceptibly and turn to the speaker, without fully realizing who it was. Just a few steps away from her stood Kakashi with a kind of sadly proud smile visible through his mask. He took another small step closer to the blonde and looked closely at her pale face. "What, were you crying?" the copy ninja asked alarmedly and carefully extended his hand, wiping away the transparent trails of tears from the kunoichi's face with his thumb, while holding his palm on her cheek. "And no, what are you?" Having swallowed a bitter lump because of her next lie, she announced to Naruto with feigned joy, instantly blushing with embarrassment because of his touch. What happened in the room before Inari appeared in it immediately surfaced in the girl's head. The hot breath of a man on her lips, the feeling of a soft touch on them, tousled hair, and the slightly unfocused look of the one she loved after sleep now definitely, irrevocably, and for the rest of your life. All this made the girl blush even more, although before that it seemed that there was nowhere to blush, and she closed her eyes in the hope of hiding all her thoughts and weaknesses from him. "Don't lie to me, Naru, I know you too well," he whispered, approaching the girl even closer. Mentally, Kakashi cursed himself for such inappropriate feelings and inability to control himself around her. But despite this, he wanted to be closer and protect this absurd girl from everyone, especially after Zabuza looked at her that time. Then Hitaki literally went crazy with the desire to tear this nuke to pieces just because of a couple of words and a look directed at his Naruto. A very young girl who in the future promises to become a gorgeous woman and possibly his wife. "Therefore, I still hope that someday you will tell me what bothers you so much from time to time," he said without a smile, abruptly pulling away and removing his hand. Since childhood, his first student had a strange peculiarity. At times she would freeze with a blank face and eyes full of sadness. But no matter how much he or Minato asked Naruto about the reason for such behavior, she remained silent or turned it all into another joke. The blonde shuddered, feeling how the warmth that Hitaki's touch gave disappeared, and opened her eyes. The man was already standing with his back to her, peering at where the kunoichi herself had recently looked in the body of a teenager, thinking about her life. So strong and reliable, he evoked only warmth and boundless love in her heart. But this echoed in her soul with even greater pain due to the inability to share her secrets and forced lies. The girl shook her head like a cat, driving away thoughts, and, having examined him from head to toe, shuddered when she noticed homemade crutches in the hands of her sensei. "Why did you get up?" Completely ignoring his words, Naru exclaimed, immediately forgetting about everything in the world. "You yourself said that you are not yet able to move," she drawled sternly, unconsciously using the mentoring tone of the suspiciously quiet-tailed reptile. "It's okay, Naruto, don't worry so much." The man laughed casually, turning to the girl. The pale face is covered with perspiration, the painful look of the sunken eyes. It seemed that Hitaki would faint right now. Kakashi, not paying attention to the girl's worried look, continued, "I came to talk to you about training." "What the hell kind of training?" the blonde shouted, no longer knowing whether she should try to knock him out and put him to rest, or simply scream and drive him back to the futon. However, under the stern gaze of her sensei, she quickly became embarrassed and drawled, "Provided that we start only tomorrow, I agree to these trainings of yours," she muttered as she exhaled, continuing to glare at the man. "That's good, Nara." Team 7 in its entirety slowly followed their mentor, hobbling on crutches, through the dense forest of the Land of Waves. After a short break, they all looked much better. Sakura turned pink again, having gotten rid of the slight tremor in her hands. Sasuke healed his numerous bruises and cuts, and Kakashi stopped looking like a walking corpse, standing on his feet out of sheer perseverance. Naruto, who still thought that Kakashi was too early to walk, looked like a mouse pouting on his rump, stoically ignoring the jokes pouring out of a cornucopia in her head. "Okay, let's start our training," Hitaki said loudly, finally stopping at a small patch where the trees were a little thinner. The team following him stopped and, standing in a row, looked at him carefully, waiting for the continuation, which was not long in coming. "Not even a year has passed!" The fox laughed sarcastically, looking forward to an extremely interesting performance. "But before that, I would like to talk to you about the source of ninja power, about chakra." Raising his index finger up, he said, looking at his charges one by one. Kakashi-sensei, I think everyone here knows about the energy of body and spirit, so, Sasuke said thoughtfully, roughly imagining the knowledge of each of their team. Itachi explained this to him, and Naru, Hatake himself during their training. Sakura was the best in the class in theory. Therefore, it turned out that there was simply no point in wasting time on such things. Okay, I understood, the man smiled in response to the Uchiha's remark. Then let's move closer to the topic, he said, nodding in agreement. By collecting chakra and releasing it, we perform a jutsu. This is done using an energy and a certain set of gestures, he said, accurately quoting the shinobi textbook. This is what most of the academy's students learn in their training. But we already know how to perform jutsu, Sasuke said, glancing strangely at his still sulking friend, who, to his surprise, did not participate in the conversation at all. Our last exam at the academy was to perform the cloning jutsu, Sakura added, supporting the object of her affection. Here you go. Those who like to chatter! The Ninetales snapped, beginning to lose patience with the long-awaited spectacle of this training. Chits, fox face, our exit is coming soon! The blonde grinned cheerfully, while maintaining her offended expression on her face. No, the copy ninja immediately snapped. You are using chakra incorrectly, said the man, enjoying the confusion and disbelief on the faces of his students. However, Naruto, whom he himself taught the basics of work, knew what the problem of her friends was, so, having finally stopped sulking, she grinned, deciding to enter into a conversation, which caused an approving chuckle from Hatake. Simply put, you are using chakra ineffectively, the blonde said, walking up to Kakashi and turning to face her comrades. Release chakra. This means collecting the energy of body and spirit, and mixing them inside oneself. She spoke evenly, now reminiscent of a strict teacher, which for everyone was completely at odds with her image of an eternal slob and incompetence. Look, our pink-haired burden has eyes popping out of her head. Even your vile Uchiha was surprised. The tailed one laughed disgustingly, thoroughly enjoying what was happening. Please, Kurama, be quiet! Barely holding back her laughter, the girl blurted out, hearing Kakashi coughing suspiciously loudly nearby, either from surprise or from the sight of Sasuke and Sakura. And depending on what jutsu you use, the type and amount of chakra released will be different, the girl continued, speaking in a calm voice. Therefore, even if you can collect a large amount of chakra, you will not be able to control it correctly. Your jutsu will weaken or not work at all. Kakashi continued for the girl, explaining to his students the essence of Naruto's words. And if you waste energy, you won't last long in battle. He spread his arms, looking mockingly at the thoughtful teenagers. These are the things. The blonde shook her head in agreement to Kurama's laughter, completing this mini-lecture. But what should we do then? Asked Sasuke, seeming to understand the whole point of the problem. Learn to control chakra. As a matter of course, the kunoichi blurted out under the guise of a child and smiled widely. Still tact not yours! The Ninetales drawled ironically, watching how the face of the pink-haired arrogant woman twisted with irritation, taking Naruto's words as an insult to Sasuke. But lately your relationship has begun to improve, he added with mockery, listening to the sorrowful sigh of his Jinchuriki. This will be a very difficult workout. Having ignored the girl's staring, he continued to speak to Hatake, as if nothing had happened. So what should we do? Sakura asked, looking at the copy ninja, immediately losing all her anger. Kakashi raised his index finger thoughtfully. Climb trees. The man smiled through the mask to the chuckle of Naru, who, together with Kurama, appreciated the long faces of Uchiha and Haruno. Climb up trees? The teenagers screamed in unison, staring in disbelief at the smiling Hatake and Naruto. God, you and him are a perfect match! The tailed trickster neighed loudly in the girl's head. Clowns! The fox added through laughter. Oh, you! The blonde hissed angrily. Forget about tea and cookies, fox face! She said gloomily. For some reason this time she was offended by her tenant many times more than usual. Yeah, meanwhile, the man answered his charges, continuing to smile through his damn mask. Hey, that's not fair! Immediately cutting off his laughter, Kurama growled back at her. What kind of training is this? Sakura asked indignantly, putting her hands on her hips like an angry mom. Who would tell me about honesty? The kunoichi said in response to the nine-tailed kunoichi, and perking up, looked at her future best friend. Please listen to the end, Sakura. She laughed, trying to be as friendly as possible. But judging by the skepticism in Haruno's gaze and the ironic roar of the tailed one, she did it extremely poorly. Naruto Namikaze! The fox barked sternly in the blonde's skull. You won't just climb trees. Meanwhile, the copy ninja held out, slyly squinting. Hands are prohibited. Okay. If you're a good fox, I'll think about it. The kunoichi drawled mockingly, evoking in Kurama a feeling of pride and anger at the same time, because, on the one hand, she caught him, and on the other, how? That was all Sakura could say to this statement. Okay, look, Kakashi said, waving his hand at the explanations and, stepping aside, pointed to one of the tallest trees with his crutch. Naruto nodded understandingly, quickly folded her hands in the sheep seal and, closing her eyes for a second, measuredly walked towards the tree. But, having approached him closely, the girl did not stop, but with an independent look continued to walk straight along the trunk, heading upward. Surprised exclamations were heard from her comrades, because the kunoichi was now walking parallel to the ground, outwardly without making much effort, as if the tree trunk was a continuation of the ground under her feet. Having reached a rather thick branch, the girl, without much thought, crossed over to it, ending up upside down. Well, do you understand now? The blonde shouted from her height, struggling with her golden hair fluttering in the wind. Concentrate your chakra and climb up. Raising her hands up, which now looked like she was reaching out to her comrades, the kunoichi told them. You win! The nine-tails growled in the girl's head, slightly scaring her with his voice, almost making her fall off the branch in surprise. But for this you need to be able to manage it, Kakashi smiled again. Hey, wait a minute! Sakura objected. What makes you think that we will become stronger if we learn to climb trees? She shouted so that Naruto could hear her. To some extent I'm starting to like her. Kurama drawled thoughtfully, looking at the pink-haired girl with her eyes. But at the same time, this one is terribly annoying. He immediately snorted under the agreeable chuckle of his Jinchuriki. And yes, this cannot be taken away from her. The kunoichi said in agreement, looking from above as her future husband explained exactly why this training was needed. She could always blow her mind for a moment or two, but in stressful situations she showed a rather tough character, giving it her all, said the girl, remembering how this fragile coward, despite the danger, tried to protect her and Sasuke during the second stage of the Chunin exam. How fiercely, without sparing herself, she fought with Ino for the opportunity to go further. Therefore, you should always have some reserve of strength necessary for precise control of chakra. Hatake said meanwhile. Well, I can talk all day long. The man grinned and took out a pair of kunai from his pouch, but it won't make you stronger. These things can only be learned through practice, he said quietly and aimed the weapon directly at the feet of his thoughtful students. With them you will mark how high you manage to climb, and each new mark will be a step that you need to overcome. The man continued to speak while Sasuke and Sakura raised kunai, and Neru continued to look at everyone from the height of her branch. For now, you won't be able to walk up the tree like me or Neru, so try it with a running start, okay? The teenagers nodded, and concentrating, stood in the same stance that the blonde had done a couple of minutes ago, preparing to perform the jutsu. Go! Sasuke chuckled, and he and Sakura each ran to their own tree. But the guy, having run less than 2 meters, cursed, slipped, and turning around in flight, returned to approximately the same place from which he started. His whole appearance said that he did not expect everything to be so complicated. After all, if you overdo it with the amount of chakra, the tree will simply break, but if it's the other way around, the leg will not stick to the tree tightly enough for the next push. On the first try, Sakura reached the very first branch and sat down on it with a cheerful smile. In general, this is exactly what Naruto expected, because last time she and Sasuke spent almost a week trying to overcome this task. Whereas Haruno did it on the first day, then simply polished her control to climb a tree, like Naruto now, at a walking pace. Well done, Sakura! Kakashi praised the girl. Aren't you jealous again? Watching this, the Kunoichi Kurama laughed in his head, but the blonde simply ignored his words. Kakashi-sensei! Naruto immediately shouted, attracting the attention of those on the ground, and not only people. Or are you still jealous? The tailed trickster corrected himself sarcastically. Yes, Naru, let's go, Hataki nodded to her, and the Kunoichi, smoothly pushing off from the branch, carefully landed a meter away from him. Where are you going? Looking up from his attempts, Sasuke asked with a shaky breath. Train! Naruto laughed,